Let's talk about Pete Cowen's towel drill. Now, Pete Cowen talks sort of loosely about this idea that if you imagine you had a towel, which I don't, we're going to use this jacket here. If you had a towel dripping of water, and what you've got to do is you've got to take hold of it like a golf club. And the idea is, as you're swinging it back, you want to feel like you are wringing out the water from within the towel, right? Now, I think this is quite an interesting idea. And the reason why I think it's interesting is because one of the things that I work on a lot with students is this idea of width, right? Now, instead of necessarily talking about the towel drill just for a moment, one of the things that I often have conversations about with a lot of my online students and people that obviously come to visit is the idea of width. And I'll often use this, right? So if you imagine I've lassoed this bit of rope together, put my lead arm through it, and I then take hold of it at the length of, say, a 7-iron, so that my left arm has been replaced by this piece of rope. And as I swing back, what I'm always encouraging students to do is to ensure, right, that you can pluck the rope. And that would mean that you are applying a good amount of what would be known as an extending or an extensor force, which basically means my right hand is pushing with a lot of force towards that wall to create this plucking sound. Now, what's important here is the position of my arm, okay? So if I have a habit where, let's say that I over-rotate my arm, okay, so I rotate my arm too much, which we'll come to in the last part of this video, all of a sudden my right wrist angle changes, and now it's really hard to push outward. It hurts my arm, okay? Now, if I do the difference again, so see my right palm is facing more towards the wall. It won't literally, I'll explain this, but that's the feeling, then I can get that plucking sound. So, and that's where I think the idea is. I think what Pete Cowen is basically talking about is the hands working kind of in opposite fashion. And to be fair, that's kind of true, isn't it? Because if your lead hand goes on the club and your trail hand goes on the club and they both kind of rotate together this way, then obviously this is going to lend itself to a floppy swing, right? What he wants to do is to get this sort of feeling that you're pushing the club out away from you, and that's the feeling of the hand sort of squeezing, right? So your right palm is squeezing onto your left thumb, your left arm is trying to stay straight, so it's pushing, and it's those forces which are creating this sort of towel dripping analogy, or at least that's my interpretation of it. So what is it that you guys can realistically, take from this? Well, let me do it again a slightly different way. Grab a couple of alignment sticks. Okay, so one of the most common problems I encounter on a day-to-day basis is golfers who have a tendency to over-rotate their arms. So what this means is that what we'd be looking for is, as I take this club back, see the way this alignment stick stays in contact with my left hip, and then as I swing up, see the way the shaft is pointing down towards my ball to target line. And if I do this, we can see the way my right arm is positioned. So yeah, there's been an element of rotation, but nothing excessive, right? See the way my right hand, similar to what I showed you earlier, see my right palm, as I take this club back, and if I pause here, my right palm's not forward facing, but it's more facing towards the wall, so that's helping me push this club very much away from me. And that's a really important thing, because if you can get good arm structure in the backswing, then you're going to find it really easy to get good arm structure in the downswing. One of the things that you have to take into consideration, and every student that I work with never realise that this is the direction they're probably going to start with the lessons, is to ensure that in the backswing you allow your lower body to move towards the right hand side. This is really important because you've got to think about your upper body as like a pendulum, so like my head and lower body, right? So if I allow my pelvis to move from right to left, my head can stay still. If you don't, then your head will move. And this is what I think this Pete Cowen idea is like, okay, if I want to push that club away from me, if I want to wring out the towel, my head has to stay still, my pelvis has to be allowed to move to the right, because that way I can keep my arms in front of me. If I move my head this way and my pelvis to the left, can you see the way now my arms drop? Now, the only way I can now lift this up, it's anatomically impossible, is to bend my arms, and there goes all of that sort of towel squeezing idea. So, Pete Cowen's towel drill, 100%. There's always an element of subjectivity. My interpretation is that's what you're kind of looking to do. Or that's where a lot of the questioning comes from students, and that's the direction I try and move them into. You want to make sure that your hands are probably working more than you realise, particularly if you're somebody who has a bit of a bent arm. The likelihood is that you don't understand swing plane as well, or you certainly don't understand your rotation as well. Anyway, you know where to find me if you want any help, and I'll see you guys again really soon.